Welcome back to episode 2 of my new series where I take a look at my favorite albums from every year since 1967 all the way up until today. And for episode 2, we're going to be talking about my favorite albums from the year 1968. We're going to be looking at my favorite albums, and then I'm going to be ultimately choosing my number one favorite album from the year 1968. And if you haven't seen the very first episode, I'll link that down below, where I did the same thing for the year 1967. And for this year, I would say maybe slightly less of my favorite albums are from this year. 1967 being one of the best years in rock and music history. 1968 still has a lot of great stuff, but I do slightly prefer 1967. But enough of the preamble. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So, a lot of the bands that released albums in 1967 also released albums in 1968. Of course, you've got the Beatles' The White Album, which is arguably considered one of the best double albums of all time. I wouldn't go that far. It's far from being a perfect album because it's just got so much stuff on it. And a lot of it is just kind of weird and just songs that I wouldn't normally listen to on their own. But of course, you've got hits. You've of course got stuff like Back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, Obla Di Obla Da, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Happiness is a Warm Gun, Blackbird, Julia, I Will, Birthday. I mean, Helter Skelter. You've got a lot of great songs on here. But at the same time, you've also got stuff like Revolution 9, which really for me is like unlistenable. And then you've got Revolution 1, which is kind of like the worst version of Revolution. And then you've got weird stuff like Piggies and Wild Honey Pie, which are just like, what are these songs? It's weird that people consider like this like a perfect album when really there's just so much weird stuff on here that like it's nowhere near as good as their best stuff that's on the album. But anyway, it's a great album nonetheless. And it came out in 1968. Another artist that also released stuff in 1968 would be Jimi Hendrix. He actually released 2 albums, Electric Ladyland, and then in America, this is where I kind of got, like, I didn't know what to do. Axis Bold as Love came out in the UK in like December of 1967, but then it came out in the US like early 1968. I'm just going to count it for 1968. But yeah, he came out with 2 albums in 1968. Axis Bold as Love and Electric Ladyland. Both have a lot of really cool hits on them, of course, and a lot of cool deep cuts. Axis Bold as Love has really cool songs like Spanish Castle Magic, Wait Until Tomorrow, Little Wing, If 6 Was 9, Castles Made of Sand, Little Miss Lover, and Bold as Love. It's really hard for me to pick which Jimi Hendrix album is my favorite. I love this album. But then you've got Electric Ladyland, which has Jimi Hendrix experimenting even more. You've got stuff like Crosstown Traffic. You've got the 15-minute epic Voodoo Child. You've got Little Miss Strange, Gypsy Eyes, Burning of the Midnight Lamp, Rainy Day, Dream Away. You've got the epic song 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be. He's doing some experimenting here, folks. Still Raining, Still Dreaming. And then, of course, he ends with, like, All Along the Watchtower, one of the best rock covers of all time. And then one of my personal favorites, Voodoo Child, Slight Return, which is one of the coolest guitar songs ever. So, yeah, both of those albums, 1968, just tremendous. What else is in from 1968? You've got another Doors album. You've got Waiting for the Sun, which, not one of my favorites. Of course, I think I prefer the 2 1967. I said that weird. I prefer the 2 albums from 1967 that they did. Waiting for the Sun does have some good stuff on it. Of course, it has the hit song, Hello, I Love You, but it's also got stuff like Love Street, The Unknown Soldier, Spanish Caravan, 5 to 1. So overall, it is a really good album, just not as good as the previous 2. You also have Creedence Clearwater Revival's debut album, Not one of my favorites in their catalog, but it still has some really good stuff on it. You've got their rendition of I Put a Spell on You, which is pretty good. You've got their classic song Susie Q. You got 99 and a Half Won't Do. Porterville, Gloomy. There are a couple of songs that I actually don't recognize on here, but overall, still a solid debut album from one of my all-time favorite bands. You also have a pretty interesting album called Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies, and they're kind of a one-hit wonder. Their big song that they're really known for is Time of the Season. Great song, and that's on this album, but it's also got some other cool songs. You've got Care of Self 44, A Rose for Emily is very good. And of course, all of these songs are definitely inspired by like the Beatles and Pink Floyd and what they're doing in this era. So if you like that kind of late 60s, like psychedelic stuff, this is definitely an album to check out. And speaking of psychedelic, we come to probably my favorite album from 1968. This was really hard to choose between this one and also one of the Jimi Hendrix albums, but I'm ultimately gonna go with Saucerful of Secrets by Pink Floyd, one of my favorite bands of all time. And this album, I think, takes that kind of weird psychedelic nature of their first album from 1967, The Pipers at the Gates of Dawn, and kind of hones in their sound a bit more. It's a bit more cohesive, and I really like this album. It also has the first songs that feature David Gilmour. The first album only had their first singer, Syd Barrett, and he is on this album, but this is kind of the period where he started to go a little crazy and started having some mental issues, so eventually he was out of the band, and David Gilmour was kind of like the new guitarist, but he could also sing, so he kind of took over the singing ability, or singing position, I should say. And so some of the songs are sung by Syd Barrett, some of them are sung by David Gilmour. I think it's a pretty cool mesh of the two. And overall, this album just has some of my favorite of the early Pink Floyd psychedelic sound. It starts out with two pretty cool songs, Let There Be More Light and Remember a Day. And then my favorite song on the album, which is just like probably a top 10 Pink Floyd song for me of all time, Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun. This is just a really kind of gloomy, atmospheric, mellow song. I used to fall asleep to this song because it was just so kind of like trance-inducing. It's so good. But then you've got kind of silly songs. You've got like Corporal Clegg, which is just a hilarious song, and you've got Seesaw and Jug Band Blues. And then you've got the epic 20. You got the epic 12-minute song, A Saucerful of Secrets. Really cool, really just very psychedelic sounding. So overall, definitely one of my favorite Pink Floyd albums. I think it's actually pretty underrated. I know a lot of people would put their debut, Pipers at the Gates of Dawn, ahead of this one, but I disagree. I actually think Saucerful of Secrets, I might even put it in my top 5 Pink Floyd albums. It's definitely above Pipers at the Gates of Dawn, though. All right, so those are my favorite albums from 1968. And to recap, of course, we've got the 2 Jimi Hendrix albums, Axis Bold as Love and Electric Ladyland. We've got the White Album from the Beatles. We've got CCR's debut album, CCR. And we've got Waiting for the Sun by The Doors. We've got Odyssey and Oracle. And then we have my all-time favorite album from 1968, Saucerful of Secrets. Please let me know down in the comments below if you agree with my picks here, and just let me know what are your favorite albums from the year 1968. I'd love to chat about it with you in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe and all that jazz, and I'll see you in the next one, which I'll be doing these videos weekly. So I think every Thursday I'm going to be posting one of these. It's going to be a long series, because we started with 1967 and we got to work our way up all the way until 2024, which gives me plenty of time to figure out what my favorite albums are for all of these years. I've kind of already done the legwork for most of these years, but like I said, a lot of these years, I really only have like 1 or 2. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more research. The 70s I've got, though, because 70s is my favorite decade. Not a problem there. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next episode where I'll be talking about my favorite albums from the year 1969. And if you guys know who my favorite band is, probably not a big surprise as to what my favorites are. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Like and subscribe and all that jazz. And thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fantastic day.